This CAS broadcast is brought to you by BBA 360 Team 2. Take heed to this important information.
We all know that money makes the world go round, and for this reason we have chosen to focus more so on the control of the money supply in the United States. We, in reality, control not only our own money supply, but most of the world's. First off, let's start by asking, who is the Fed? The Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. Many nations use a central bank, but the Federal Reserve is the most powerful. What many do not know is that the Fed and our government have no real affiliation. In 1913, President Wilson and Congress signed into law the Federal Reserve Act, which gave complete control of the United States money supply to the Fed, a private banking institution. The Fed is an independent entity, but is subject to oversight from Congress. Basically, what this means is that their decisions do not have to be ratified by the President or anyone else in the government, but Congress periodically reviews the Fed's activities. The fact is that the Fed has never been audited and has had full control over our economy ever since its creation with little oversight by our government. Take a look at this dollar. Notice the term note at the top of the paper? Have you ever noticed this before? This term note teaches us that we in the US have a fiat currency. In fact, many countries have fiat currencies. So what does this really mean? Fiat currency is a currency the government has declared to be legal tender, despite the fact that it has no intrinsic value and is not backed by any reserves. Historically, most currencies were based on physical gold, silver, or a valuable commodity, but fiat money is based solely on faith. Because fiat money is not backed by any physical reserves, it risks becoming worthless due to hyperinflation. If people lose faith in our nation's currency, the money will no longer hold any value. This is scary stuff. Money supply is an extremely deep topic and can be extremely difficult to understand. So we are going to focus on the topic of fractional reserve banking and how it affects our money supply. Have you ever heard of the term money from thin air? Well, it comes from several things, but fractional reserve banking is one of them, and you'll see why. Fractional reserve banking is a banking system in which only a fraction of bank deposits are backed by actual cash on hand and are available for withdrawal. This is done to expand the economy by freeing up capital that can be loaned out to other parties. But as you will learn, it's basically fraud. The Federal Reserve Bank determines the reserve ratio, which sets the fraction of deposits that must be held at the bank against its accounts in either cash in the vault or deposits at the Fed. The normal reserve ratio is 0.1 or 10%. So that means that the bank must keep 10% of your money that you deposit and that the other 90% can go back into the economy to even make more money. Suppose Billy makes a deposit of $1,000 at Bank A. If the reserve ratio is 10%, then the bank can lend out $900 of his deposit and keep $100 as reserves. Let's say that the $900 is then given in a loan and that the loan makes its way to Sam, who deposits it into Bank B. That bank then puts 10% or $90 in its reserves and lends out the other $810. This $810 is spent and eventually deposited into Bank C. And that new bank then keeps $81 and lends out the other $729. As the lending depositing cycle continues, the loan amounts of $900, $810, $720, and so on eventually add up to equal $9,000. If you add up the reserves from each transaction, $100, $90, $81, $72, and so on, it will eventually add up to $1,000. So the banks are still holding true to the reserve ratio. They have $1,000 in reserves and $9,000 of money made from thin air thrown into our economy, boosting the actual money supply. Here's the kicker. When you make a deposit into a bank, they are essentially promising you that they will have your $1,000 deposit when you need it. This is done when they hand you your deposit receipt. But as seen earlier, the bank only handles $100 of your deposit and has lent out the other $900. So in reality, they don't have all your money. What the bank is counting on is that you and every other person that banks there will not want to remove all of your deposits at once before the loans of your money have actually been paid back. A bank having thousands of customers does reduce the risk of not having your deposit. But if everyone who uses your bank wants their money at once, if there's an actual real crisis and we all need our cash, they won't have it. As you might be thinking, yes, your money is insured up to a certain amount by the FDIC. So if a bank does not have your money when you need it, the FDIC will give it to you. But where does the FDIC receive their money from? Oh, that's right, you the taxpayer. This in a gist is fractional reserve banking, and is only one way the money supply is affected, but a very important one. We hope you have enjoyed our presentation, and we would encourage you to study further into the current monetary policy of the United States and how our economy works.